In this video, I'm going to be painting DC Comics' Zatanna by Abe3D. This is a 1/4 scale statue. I hope you enjoy the video, possibly learn something. Yeah. As I typically do, I'm starting with a brown primer for the flesh tones and going over that with a purple zenithal shade. I let that dry and then do a zenithal highlight with white. I do a little blending here, but I'm not too worried about that at this stage. And now I'm going over the entire surface with the flesh base. Again, I'm using a craft paint, which has been thinned out so I can use it through an airbrush. I'll go over the entire surface with the base coat. That's why it's called a base coat. For the first highlight, I've added some white to the base tone color. I'm going to add a little white progressively as I do progressive highlights. The legs are getting stockings, so I didn't worry too much about highlights. That said, it is time to do some masking. This is pretty thin masking tape. It's around 1/8 of an inch. This is just a placeholder. It's going to tell me where I want to put the line for the stocking. Before you start painting, you're going to remove this piece of masking tape, so it's important you get that width right. Here I'm coming in with the actual masking. You can try standard masking tape if you like, but I'd be a little concerned with that. This masking tape is made specifically for painting, so it's pretty low tack. Still be careful when you're removing it. There's always the possibility of removing paint that you don't want to remove. Also, make sure you've got it stuck down very well. You absolutely do not want bleed through at this point, or any point, but you know, no bleed through at all. Make sure your masking tape's stuck down. I'm now coming in with some black ink. I want this line to be solid, and the stockings themselves to be somewhat translucent. Time to remove some masking tape. Also, if you turn your PSI down, you don't need to mask everything. I didn't and didn't have any issues. Okay, nice clean crisp lines. For the stockings themselves, I'm coming in with black ink. I'm only using this in the areas where the stockings aren't stretched as much. Knee joints, around the feet, places like that. The goal here is to create some depth. As you can tell, I'm not trying to put on a very heavy coat. Hitting the ankles, behind the knees, in front of the knees, and various other places. Butt cheeks and so forth. Now it's time for the stocking body. I don't know what you'd call this. This is a transparent brown ink. You want that black to show through. You also want the original skin color to show through a bit. You can go as light or as dark as you want with this. Given Zatanna's outfit, I've chosen to go pretty dark with this. I've done a few coats, and as you can tell, after it dries, it does tend to be a bit darker. I hope to find a model in the future to try this technique with lighter stockings, maybe even white. Painting in the shoes and the bottoms with a brush, just using black. You may have noticed that for the soles of the shoes, I've painted a red coat. A little bit of variety of colors, nice here. This is a pretty simple model to paint. There aren't very many colors, so any chance to add some vibrancy is a pretty good idea in my opinion. Using a brush here as opposed to trying to mask everything off, that seemed like it'd be a nightmare. There aren't too many details, so brush painting's not a big deal. Just make sure you thin your paint out so that you don't leave strokes. And I'm putting a highlight with a little bit of blue ink. Now that the legs are finished, it's time to paint the hands. It's the same process I used for the legs. Brown primer, purple for shadows, white zenithal highlight, and then the flesh tone. Okay, flesh tone for the wrists. And I'm doing some freckling here. I'm using the same brown ink that I used for the stockings, but I've turned the PSI down on the compressor. Masked off the flesh, and I'm coming in with some white for the gloves. For the shadows on the gloves, coming in with some blue. Blue's a great shadow color for white. For the shirt, I'm trying something a little different. I'm trying to achieve a silk look. I want it to be somewhat sheer, but not anything gratuitous. So I am coming in with flesh tones for the boobs. I'm hoping there's going to be some transparency, but I don't want it to be much at all. Going over the whole shirt in white now, and using that same powder blue for the shadows. I'll let that dry and then go over everything with a pearlescent white. Again, trying to achieve silk. I think it turned out okay. Pretty minimal effort, and I think it gave a pretty decent look. Now for this corset, cummerbund, whatever it is, I have no idea what this is. I want this to end up gold, so I am painting a base coat of brown. And like a savage, I'm pouring straight from the bottle onto the model. I make no apologies. This worked pretty well. No reason to dirty a palette. This is a metallic gold by Vallejo. Gets pretty decent coverage. And again for the jacket, I'm just coming in with a brush. This is a pretty big area, but it's very simple. I absolutely did not want to have to try to mask off everything. I am very lazy when it comes to that sort of thing. Again, I'm using a blue ink for the highlight. Painting the hat black. It was gray before, if you couldn't tell. Easier to tell with the hair. Zatanna's got black hair, so like I said, this is a pretty simple color scheme model. Black, white, gold, and a little red. Not too much going on. I am also highlighting the hair and the hat with blue. Something of an homage to comic book panels. Blue is always the highlight color for black, it seems. For the face, you guessed it, brown primer, purple shadows, white highlights, and that flesh tone. There's a lot less exposed skin on this model than I'm used to painting, which is fine. Just a change of pace. Highlight color. Time for some freckling. Again, brown transparent ink with the PSI on the airbrush turned down to maybe 4. Now coming in and hitting the eyes, around the nose, and a little on the cheeks with a warmer flesh tone, pink. If it creases, it gets this color. A little in the ears too, because why not? Time to paint some eyeballs. Off-white paint. Thinned out a bit. If it's something I haven't mentioned yet, this is a 1/4 scale model by Abe 3D. He tends to sculpt the irises, which makes painting them a bit easier. Coming in on the lips and going over those with some of that color that I used earlier for the eyes. And now I'm coming in with some red. Zatanna's a magician. She's working. She's got makeup on. Bright red lipstick seems pretty reasonable for a stage performer. I do a little bit of wet blending on the bottom lip, just to add a little bit of depth. Zatanna has blue eyes. This blue is a bit too light, but it makes for a nice placeholder in case I get the placement wrong. I'd rather not have to paint over dark blue with white if I don't have to. Now that I do have that placement figured out, I'm coming in with some darker blue. A little bit of black on a toothpick for the pupils. And a touch of white. Time to paint some eyelashes. This is never fun for me. I don't know why. I guess I'm always worried that I'm gonna mess up at this point, and this would be a bad time to mess up. Not that there's ever really a good time, but it'd be pretty tough to disguise a screw up here. Coming in and painting eyebrows. Abe sculpts the eyebrows on the models. That's good in some ways, though there are things about that that I don't care for. So I sanded them down a bit. Time to add some makeup. Chalk pastels, purple, red, white. On 40 grit sandpaper. Now, this brush is a trash brush. Do not use a good brush for this. You are sanding the brush bristles. You will absolutely destroy a good brush, or a bad brush, but this is cheap, so whatever. Once you get your color figured out, scrub it in pretty well. Eyeshadow, a little bit on the cheeks, even a little on the lips. Time to paint the base. I've primed this in red and gray. Now I'm coming in with some white for some highlights. And thinned out brown paint. Thinned out yellow paint. These are hardwood floors. Doing something a little weird here. After it dries, it ends up looking somewhat like wood. Coming in with an oil wash. Brown. You want to add a little black. Probably not a bad idea. And finishing up this stuff on the base. Little cloth. Little rabbit. Painting his shadows purple. He's going to be a white rabbit, so white coat. Coming in with some of that same pink that I used for Zatanna for his ears. A little around his mouth. His feet, a little bit on the belly, but nothing too substantial. Time to paint his little eyeballs. Big black pupil. He doesn't know what Zatanna is going to do to him. Send him to another dimension. Hang out with Trigon. He's ready for whatever the world throws at him. Look at those eyeballs. And that's the video. I hope you enjoyed it. If not, I'm sorry. Hopefully you were at least entertained. If not, I'm sorry for that too. Regardless, like and subscribe. Leave a comment if you've got any questions. Leave a comment if you don't have any questions. I'll answer it. Thanks for watching. Bye.